Down to their last strike on multiple pitches, Mike Yastrzemski came up with a heroic swing of the bat that tied the game in the ninth inning, and the Giants went on to add on in extra innings, and they sweep the Cardinals. They put themselves in a good position with a really, really tough stretch of games coming up. Also, top prospect Luis Matos, as expected, did debut in the major leagues, but he was subbed out late in the game. So is that something to expect or kind of a one-time thing? We'll get into all of it next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you so much for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever it is that you get your podcasts, including YouTube. So check us out there if you have not already, and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. So for parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit, ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. And yes, coming up on today's show, a jam-packed show with a lot of exciting things to discuss. I mean, the game itself and the heroic comeback, and Mike Yastrzemski with an incredible swing, 2 outs, 2 strikes in the ninth, down by a couple runs, tying up the game, and how that just, they would have been all right losing that game. The takeaway would have been, it's a series win, and you turn the page and you go to Los Angeles and you try to pick up another series win. But to sweep the series at the position that it put them in, with another exciting young player now on the roster in Luis Matos, and we'll get more into his debut and the fact that he was subbed out a little bit later. But just to discuss the game, I think that the game and the position that it put the Giants in is the most significant part of yesterday. And yeah, I mean, what else can you say? The Giants, Anthony DeSclafani, who we'll talk about later as well, had another rough outing and gave up 5 runs in the first 3 innings. I'm not sure he even made it through 3. Yeah, he made 3 innings pitched, 5 runs, and the Giants got 2 in the first. It really could have been more. Casey Schmidt grounded into a double play with the bases loaded with a 2-0 lead, and so Casey Schmidt's struggles continue, and the Giants fell behind 5-2. But as they've done recently, like in Colorado, they just kind of kept themselves in the game. And how did they do it? Well, just like in Colorado, the bullpen didn't allow a thing. Jacob Junis, 3 scoreless innings. Taylor Rogers, a scoreless inning. Ryan Walker, a scoreless inning. Tyler Rogers, scoreless inning. And then once the Giants had the lead, Camilo Doval, a scoreless inning. And so the bullpen has been the best in the majors for like a month and a half now, which, a lot of overreacting to when they were struggling for the first few weeks of the season. Well, they've certainly settled in a major way. And so they stayed in the game. They picked up a run in the 7th. And then in the 9th, they got Lamont Wade Jr. walked, which was huge. You're down by 2 runs. So you need a base runner in order to get the tying run to the plate. And as he's done so often this season, Wade Jr. worked a walk. It was a full count, and he check swung. I mean, it's like this is a game of inches. They really could have said he swung. But I think an out was made after that, and then it brought up Mike Yastrzemski. He fell behind in the count 0-2. He laid off a couple pitches out of the zone. He fouled off a tough pitch that was up and away, and I rewatched this on the Cardinals broadcast, and they were pointing out, I'm not sure they said this on the Giants broadcast, Yastrzemski had faced Giovanni Gallegos 4 times previously in his career, and he was 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. And so I believe that head-to-head matchups in small samples, and when we're talking small samples, yes, I'm talking certainly 4, but also even like 10, 20, 30 plate appearances. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. I know that, Kruk and Kipe, ownage is ownage, all that, but obviously not. In this case, 0 for 4 with 4 Ks, and then in this circumstance, just a great at-bat and just an unbelievable swing he put on a middle fastball. It was just right where you would want it, and he just launched it into right to tie the game. Giants, scoreless inning in the bottom of the ninth by Tyler Rogers, just clean and easy as it's been for him all year. And the Giants picked up 3 in the top of the 10th and shut him down in the bottom of the 10th. Even though it was a little bit dicey, Duvall's been a little bit, not perfect with his command in recent games. But what does it mean? Well, it means the Giants pull away a little bit from that 500 mark. Instead of falling back to 35 and 33, just a little bit over 500, now they're 4 games over 500 for the first time all season at 36 and 32. And they also have a plus 27 run differential, which is basically, it's one of the best in the league. The Padres quietly here are sneaking up on the Giants. And that's why this is significant, is because the National League playoff picture is it's not looking as anticipated, in that like Pittsburgh is leading the Central. You've got Milwaukee in second place at 34 and 34. I think most people expected the Cardinals to win the National League Central, and they're in last place and have one of the worst, actually the worst record in the National League. And you've got a team like Miami in a playoff spot, which, with a negative 30 run differential, they have a better record than the Giants, who have a plus 30. Giants have, like a plus 60 run differential over the Marlins, and yet the Marlins have a better record. And so I would expect eventually the Marlins are going to come back down to earth a little bit, but the teams that I worry about creeping up behind are teams like the Phillies, the Padres, the Mets potentially, and those teams right now are behind the Giants, and some more than others. The Padres are only 2.5 back, the Mets are 4 back, the Phillies are 2 back, but the Giants are in a playoff position. And if the season ended today, guess what they would do? They would play Pittsburgh as the weakest division winner. And so, there is a scenario where being a wild card team, and even being that last wild card team, ends up being more favorable because Miami would have to play the Dodgers in LA as the other 2 wild card teams, and the Giants, as the quote-unquote worst wildcard team, would play the weakest division winner, who is worse than the top wildcard team. And so the rules kind of don't make sense, and that would be a great scenario if you're the Giants and you end up going to Pittsburgh for your best of 3 series. And so obviously it's early for this kind of talk, but just to point out, the Giants are in a playoff spot, and they have a 2-game lead over the Brewers and Phillies for that 3rd wildcard spot. And a tough part of the schedule coming up, with just a lot of it's the Dodgers, then it's the Padres for I think 4 games, and then it's the D-backs, and then the Blue Jays and the Mets. It's a gauntlet that the Giants are about to go through. So kind of sweeping the Cardinals here, kicking them while they're down, getting the job done was important, and the Giants were able to do it. So we will get into Luis Matos's major league debut in just a minute, how he looked and how he was substituted out. And is that a concern? Are people worried that he's going to be platooned? Is he going to be platooned? So we will get into all of that in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Now, I received a couple pairs of Bird Dogs in the mail, and I immediately, really wanted to put them on because I had heard so many great things. And the first thing I noticed upon putting them on was that they were the most comfortable pair of shorts that I had ever worn. But I didn't actually get a good look at them. I didn't put them on in front of a mirror. So I walk out into the living room, and my girlfriend, who knew I was putting them on, she immediately said, "These are the best looking shorts that you have ever worn." And so I was stunned, like, because of the comfort and, it's hard to get the best of both worlds. Normally a comfortable pair of shorts, you're like, well, I can't wear this to the office, but this is a different story with Bird Dogs. And also go to birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB, and not only can you get the most amazing shorts, but you can get this free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. All right, as promised, we are going to discuss Luis Matos' MLB debut yesterday. And I think that there's a lot to say about it, and we will say all of the things that there are to say. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow on the show, we're going to be doing a mailbag. We've got a lot of leftover mailbag questions. Minor league updates are more important than ever because we are seeing aggressive moves in the Giants minor league system. Marco Luciano, somewhat of a forgotten name. I mean, not really, but all these other prospects have made their moves, but Luciano's still in Double-A, but showing some signs. So I definitely want to talk about him and others and just more mailbag questions. And the Giants, their next series, they play the Dodgers at 7:10 Pacific on Friday, and you can catch every pitch of the Giants hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. It's TBD for the Dodgers who's going to be pitching, and John Brebbia on the mound for the Giants. And so you're probably going to see Manaya, I would guess, in that long relief role, in which he's done extremely well. So anyway, Luis Matos was in fact promoted to the major leagues, and the corresponding move, of course, unfortunately, was that Mitch Haniger had to go on the IL with a right forearm fracture, and apparently he's having surgery. It requires surgery, and he's having surgery today, and we're gonna get an update about the timeline after the surgery is completed. And so, he's gonna miss, I'm no doctor, but at least a month and a half, I would imagine, and probably more. So we'll see. We'll just wait for that update, but it's obviously a horrible break, no pun intended, for Mitch Haniger, and I think for the Giants. I mean, Matos is an unproven commodity, whereas Haniger, despite his struggles, you kind of know what you're going to get when all is said and done. And so to lose him, he's just dealt with so many freak injuries, is unfortunate. And then on the good news side of things, J.D. Davis was diagnosed with a grade 1 ankle sprain, and he says he will miss 3 to 10 days, which is the best case scenario. And he's just become such an important everyday player. I mean, it's amazing that they got this guy in the Darren Ruff trade plus a bunch of prospects. So that's great news. And then you also get Luis Matos. So he makes his major league debut. He becomes the second youngest position player in the major leagues right now, fourth youngest player, period, in the major leagues right now. And in his first at bat, what did he do? He just hit, it was kind of a seeing eye ground ball. Wasn't hit particularly hard. It was like 93 or something, which doesn't technically classify as hard hit. He saw, apparently, I think I heard this on the post-game show, he didn't swing at any of the pitches he saw in this game that were out of the strike zone. So, the swing decisions, a big part, or it may have been a Grant Brisbee piece in which he allows himself to go dream big on Luis Matos. And his other two at-bats, he kind of somewhat softly lined out in both of them, but he just missed the barrel just barely, but they were good trajectories, I guess is what I would say, and that if he just kind of squared them up a little bit more, then it'd be great. But you can't judge a player by one game ever, and so we're not going to. He didn't have any particularly challenging plays in the outfield. He did start in center field. He had a not so great base running moment in the first inning when he probably should have got to third from first on a ball that Thairo Estrada hit down the line. But, he went back to tag when I think he should have gone halfway or more on the play because, I don't know, we're nitpicking here. And then so it's one game and he did a perfectly fine job. But so he's here to stay. Mitch Haniger is going to miss a lot of time and they're going to give probably Matos a lot of rope here to show what he can do. And so he was pinch hit for. And then I think it probably raised alarm bells with a lot of people like, oh my gosh, is Gabe Kapler going to just platoon this guy? Because it was a left-handed starting pitcher. Matos hit second in the lineup. And, he faced the lefty. I think it was all three of his at-bats because Jordan Montgomery really settled in after a rough first inning. And then as soon as there was a righty on the mound, they substituted out Matos for Michael Conforto. But there's so much added important context to consider given to explain what the situation was. And what the situation was, I believe it was the seventh inning, and they had a runner on base. And this is when Jordan Montgomery was taken out. The top of the lineup was coming up. Austin Slater and Luis Matos and Thairo Estrada back to back to back, three right-handed pitchers. And so the Cardinals naturally go to three right-handed hitters. So the Cardinals naturally go to a right-handed pitcher, Jordan Hicks, who throws like 104 miles an hour and can be really, really tough. And so obviously the move is to initially pinch hit for Austin Slater. That's just like what they do with him, and for good reason. He's got a long track record of being much better against lefties, and he just gets platooned. And so they use, I think Jock Peterson was used in place of Slater there, and Peterson, I think he struck out. And then I think it was 2 outs at that point with Matos coming up. It may have only been 1 out, but basically from Kapler's perspective is that you don't know that you're going to get another base runner in this game. And so to have a guy already on base and to have your bullets on the bench, your left-handed bullets in Jock Peterson and Michael Conforto, they also had Blake Sable and Brandon Crawford. It was just like a special circumstance in which the hitter represented the tying run, and you've got two really good left-handed hitters on the bench there, and you do not know that you're going to get another opportunity to tie the game with one swing. And so to send up Jock and Conforto, I think, two proven left-handed power hitters, just two of the better left-handed power bats in the league against a righty, being able to send them up there as the potential tying run, I think was the right call. And it doesn't mean, I don't believe, that Matos is just going to be platooned. It was just a special circumstance. And if he goes out there and those special circumstances won't come up all the time and he'll face righties, and if he just kind of establishes himself quickly that he's a good player, like Casey Schmidt and Patrick Bailey they started out getting plenty of opportunities against both. And Casey Schmidt kind of played his way out of playing against righties because their bat quality was poor against righties and sometimes even against lefties. But Matos will get his chances. So I think it was a special circumstance, and I would expect him, whether it's a lefty or a righty starter, that he'll be in the lineup pretty much every day moving forward. And so it was a special circumstance, and if Matos proves himself to be a good player, then he will become a guy that doesn't get pinch hit for, if he proves that he can hit righties. But in that moment, it was just like, okay, use your two big bullets to try to tie the game. And, it ended up, the lineup flipped over again, and you got more Michael Conforto and Jock Peterson at bats against right-handed pitchers. And they didn't end up coming through. You're not always going to, but it's still, like, probability-wise and statistically-wise, I think a very reasonable thing to do. But just don't worry about it. Righty starter on the mound. I don't know who's going for LA in the series opener, but I would fully expect Matos will be in the starting lineup. Maybe not batting second when there's a righty on the mound, but nonetheless in the lineup, and he'll get those shots against right-handed pitching. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to discuss the fact that the Giants starting pitching, which many thought was going to be like the strength of this team, it really has not been for I mean, they've got a couple guys doing quite well, but even Tony DeSclafani, he started out the year great, but it's just been on a prolonged stretch of being quite the opposite. And so we will get into the starting pitching and DeSclafani and the others that have struggled in just a minute and what they can do about it next. But first, all right, as promised, we're going to discuss the starting pitching woes, really, for the San Francisco Giants. I mean, in a way, it's weird because they've got some guys who have been really good and they've got some guys who were good and who are now struggling, and so it's just kind of a complicated situation. Thanks again, by the way, for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Every dayers tomorrow on the show. We will be doing a mailbag episode and providing minor league updates, and that's exciting because this year we're seeing the prospects and we haven't even seen their two best prospects who could possibly debut this season as well, especially Kyle Harrison. So we've seen so many young players make an impact already, and there may be two of the best yet to come. So that's exciting. By the way, the Giants play the Dodgers on Friday at 7:10 Pacific, and you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. Obviously, a huge series. The Dodgers they're not pitching well, and so the Giants have been hitting pretty darn well, and it's an opportunity to go in. They're not the Dodgers of the last several years. They're kind of banged up, and Giants are only a couple games behind them in the standings. So really an opportunity. But anyway, the starting pitching, which it's so funny, like I've said a million times, you can go into a season thinking you know what's going to happen, and then it doesn't play out that way. And like an example I'll give is that a lot of people were still worried about the defense, and I think the defense, although they've had some rough games in recent days, and if you're just using errors, then yeah, you think they're bad defensively, but by more advanced metrics, and there's so many reasons why fielding percentage and just looking at straight errors is a very imperfect way of evaluating defense. Anyway, the defense has been, I would say, kind of a strength for the San Francisco Giants as opposed to the dramatic weakness it was last year. And we thought coming into this year that the starting pitching was going to be the biggest strength of this team. I'll go on record saying I really thought people were underrating their offensive potential. And sure enough, I think they've been a good offensive team. And I also said I thought the defense would be much better than people thought, at least average, and they've been better than that, I think. And it shows in the position player Fangraphs wins above replacement. The Giants are third in the National League, third best behind the Braves and Dodgers. So it's, if they have a weakness right now, it's not really the position player group, although the injuries play a factor. But anyway, Alex Cobb has had his struggles recently. A lot of first inning struggles. He struggled in St. Louis. He struggled in Colorado, which is obviously a tough place to pitch. Logan Webb has been good. Gave up a couple more homers, though, the other day in St. Louis, which is uncharacteristic for him. But look, Cobb has a 3.09 ERA. Webb has a 3.15. And so those two are fine. But when you look beyond that, all of a sudden, Anthony DeSclafani's ERA is 4.31 when he started out the season as just like really, really good. I mean, it wasn't just like fluky. He was throwing the ball so well and just great shapes on his pitches and just putting them where he wanted them. But lately, I mean, over his last, I think it's like 6 starts or so, I am pulling up the game log to try to pinpoint. He had a rough outing against the Nationals in which he gave up 5 earned runs in 7 innings. And yeah, over that time, which is 8 starts, he's got a 6.31 earned run average over his last 8 starts, whereas his first 6 starts, he had a 2.13 ERA. And so, yeah, you add it all together and it's a 4.31. The fielding independent pitching is a little better. He hasn't stranded as many base runners as you would expect. He's at 63% strand rate, and normally you're going to be around 72%. So I guess that eventually probably will be working in his favor. But it was just another rough one. He just didn't have great command, was falling behind. The shapes on his pitches weren't right. And so all of a sudden, and he's like one of your three guys in the rotation right now. They don't even have even a four-man rotation. They're going with three, and then in bullpen games with John Brebbia, and those have worked out well. To be fair, like it's not like they're getting killed in these bullpen games, but Alex Wood is on the injured list, but he may actually start that second game in LA. He made a rehab start, and then he went to Arizona to face hitters at in Arizona, like at the team facility. But his numbers on the season haven't been very good. And Sean Manaea and Ross Stripling obviously were terrible when they were in the starting rotation. But Manaea has been so good out of the pen that I might consider, if I was in charge, obviously I'm not, but that Manaea, just have him start and just say, don't change a thing. Just pitch like that. Even if you're just going to give us 4 innings, just keep doing what you're doing. But anyway, like Stripling's hurt, Woods hurt and or ineffective, DeSclafani's regressed. So all of a sudden pitching is kind of a problem. And so, I think like with the trade deadline a month and a half away, if you had to look at one area for this team, it's starting pitching. And it's ironic because they had all this depth and people thought it was going to be the strength of this team. And all of a sudden I'm saying the one area where I think they have a weakness is starting pitching. The bullpen has been great for like a month and a half. And the position player group, like I said, is third best in the National League in terms of Fangraphs wins above replacement. And look, obviously with the injuries, if Luis Matos doesn't do well, then maybe you need an outfielder, but he's going to get that look, and it's good timing with the trade deadline still far off. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that the starting pitching is just not doing exactly what we expected outside of Cobb and Webb, but even those two have had their struggles at times, but the overall numbers are good. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Every dayers tomorrow on the show, we will be doing a mailbag episode and also talking about some prospects. What's the latest with Kyle Harrison, Carson Whisenhunt, Marco Luciano, who's doing some good things in Double-A. And hey, Kapler said we could see him by the end of the year. By the way, the Giants play the Dodgers at 7:15 Pacific on Friday, and you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot. So thanks in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.